Ron Johnson, the Republican senator from Wisconsin, has called out the Department of Justice for their potential unequal treatment of Antifa and BLM rioters versus the January 6th Capitol protesters. There has been a lot of news, there's been a lot of effort going into capturing and prosecuting the January 6th protesters, and not a lot of news or effort seems to have been spent on the people who made major cities into horrific terror zones for much of 2020. Ron Johnson is joined by a couple other senators, Tommy Tuberville, Ted Cruz, Rick Scott, and Mike Lee, a veritable rogues gallery of Republican senators, of course, coming in to call out the DOJ on their potential mistreatment or disparate treatment of these people. Let's talk about what's going on, and let's take a look at the letter that they penned together and see what is happening out there. I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer. I'm also a legal and political commentator on YouTube and on Odyssey. Wherever you're watching, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and turn on those notifications so the second you see one of these videos pop up, you can go ahead and click on it right from the comfort of your own couch, car, whatever it is that you may be sitting in or on at the time. Here we go. This is from Fox News, and the link to this, as well as the link to the letter, will be put down in the description. There's sometimes useful information down there, so you can check that out. Senator Johnson warns of unequal application of justice as Capitol riot suspects sit in jail versus Antifa and BLM. Homeland Security Committee member says DOJ failing to hold Antifa to same prosecutorial standard as the January 6th suspects. And everybody knows this has been happening, right? Like, everybody knows this. In fact, we knew this before the January 6th riots even occurred. We knew this when we watched people attempting to burn down federal courthouses, that have laid sieges to entire city blocks, that have annexed parts of the United States into their own Chaz and Chop zones, who have participated in burglary, organized crime, murder, and all of these things, just not really getting a lot of interest or attention from law enforcement. It's like, since they were protesting law enforcement decided to stand back. Well, that's great and all, but we do have people who have been routinely breaking the law, resulting in massive loss of property and in some cases loss of life for over a year. And those people do not seem to be getting even a modicum of attention that the January 6th protesters were getting. The January 6th protests were the only actual loss of life that occurred from direct violence at the protest was one protester, Ashley Babbitt, who I have a video about. You can find it right up here in the corner. There will be a little link you can click if you want to check out more about that. But that is the only death that has been linked specifically to violent acts, and those violent acts came from the government in this case. Whereas with the BLM and Antifa riots, sure, there are some people out there peacefully protesting the use of law enforcement in specific ways in the United States that they believe to be unfair. However, there were many people who used the cover of those protests to engage in far more violent and far less peaceful protests that involved arson, murder, rape, burglary, theft, all sorts of crimes, many of which are caught on camera. And again, we really didn't see any sort of go-get-em attitude from the DOJ on that. But with the January 6th stuff, we've got Congress doing their own investigations, the FBI, the DOJ, everybody's investigating everything. And it seems a little bit unequal. That's all. That's all Ron's saying. That's all I'm saying. You know, this seems a little bit unequal. Now, importantly, Ron Johnson, in this letter and in his interview with Mark Levin, was not asking for reduced treatment, to bring down the level of intensity on the January 6th rioters. He condemned the January 6th protest riot, whatever. Guys, I'm just using colloquial terms. don't jump down my throat on this. I don't really care what you want to call it. But the January 6th event, they're using, he's not calling for reduced action on them. He actually condemns that event, and he says he expects full prosecutions to the fullest extent of the law on those people, so long as they comport with the ideas of justice. What he wants is that same level of go-get-em attitude applied to the people who held major cities hostage for the better part of 2020. So let's take a peek down here to some of the lines from the thing. We've got Johnson told Levin that he, Tuberville, and Mike Lee, Rick Scott, and Ted Cruz were the only signatories to the letter. So this is a big part. There's only 5 Republican senators signing the letter, but he calls out exactly why. You already know. Likely because the media tends to slaughter and attack whoever voices concerns or contrasting narrative to the one put out by the Democrats about such events. And of course, the media has shown itself to be a Democrat propaganda machine. This isn't new. Everybody knows how this has worked for the past several decades. The media has towed one party's line entirely, and they're towing it here today. I mean, you've all seen the iconic picture of the guy standing there, you know, talking, the news anchor, and it says mostly peaceful protests, and the city is on fire behind him. It's like the perfect news irony. You've seen it, and you saw this across the nation. You saw them downplaying the severity and gravity of these protests all over the place. But he says the fact that I question the narrative that there were thousands of armed insurrections intent on overthrowing the government. You've seen how that's worked out for me, he remarked. So he's saying that these BLM and Antifa protests that happened throughout all of 2020 were done with the same level of intent that the media and the Democrats are ascribing to the January 6th protests. So you're saying they were trying to overthrow the government. They were using violence and to subvert the United States system of governance and to subvert the state's efforts. That was pretty clear that that's what was going on. He praises Tucker Carlson, and he says they want to sweep all that under the rug. And there are 500 different left-wing riots compared to just the one in January 6th. They want to sweep all that under the rug and just concentrate on what we all condemned. By the way, what happened in the Capitol, I wasn't happy with that. I found the Capitol violence repugnant and the racial slurs repulsive. I condemn those actions. I want those individuals prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And of course, he has to say this because his words are going to be misconstrued. His and these 5 Republicans are going to be misconstrued as asking for leniency for the Capitol rioters, because the narrative is that these guys all approve of what happened at the Capitol, when none of them have actually approved of it. But the Democrats and the media have all said, well, but you know, they actually liked it, right? That's what they say the other thing. But what they really mean, though, is that they want it to happen all the time, which is, of course, ridiculous. They have condemned it from the start. They condemned it on the day it happened. Nobody in office was happy about the January 6th things. Whatever you may think about the overall effectiveness of it, the people in office who are at the Capitol building know exactly how hard that made their life for the next, as Republicans specifically, for the next year to 2 years to come. They were going to be attacked with fomenting this mob, whether they participated in anything or not. That was going to be laid on their shoulders whenever they tried to do anything in Congress. It's going to impact their fundraising. It impacted their ability to continue challenging election results and all of that stuff. So that was the people in office have basically universally condemned January 6th because it has been placed upon their shoulders. Whatever their actual feelings on it, they have publicly condemned it. All right, so we have the letter here. Let's take a quick peek of this. It says the U.S. Department of Justice is currently dedicating enormous resources and manpower to investigating and prosecuting the criminals who breached the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. We fully support and appreciate the efforts by the DOJ and its federal, state, and local law enforcement partners to hold those responsible fully accountable. We join all Americans in the expectation that the DOJ's response to the events of January 6th will result in rightful criminal prosecutions and accountability. As you are aware, the mission of the DOJ is, among other things, to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice for all Americans. Do you feel fair and impartial treatment? Do you feel it? Today, we write to request information about our concerns regarding potential unequal justice administered in response to other recent instances of mass unrest, destruction, and the loss of life throughout the United States. And of course, they bring up spring and summer of 2020. Federal courthouse in Portland has been under siege for months. Property damage estimates are $1 billion to $2 billion so far. So in June 2020, the DOJ reportedly compiled the following information regarding last year's unrest. 1 federal officer was killed, 147 federal officers injured, and 600 local officers were injured around the country during the protests, frequently from projectiles. According to the Bureau of ATF, since the start of the unrest, there have been 81 federal firearms license burglaries of an estimated loss of 1,116 firearms, 876 reported arsons, 76 explosive incidents, and 46 ATF arrests. But here we go. This is the problem. It's this next paragraph. So they've been doing the setup at the opening part of the letter. Look, DOJ's been doing all this stuff, but we have some concerns. Here's the concern. Despite these numerous examples of violence occurring during these protests, it appears that individuals charged with committing crimes at these events may benefit from infrequent prosecutions and minimal, if any, penalties. According to a recent article, prosecutors have approved deals in at least half a dozen federal felony cases arising from clashes between protesters and law enforcement in Oregon last summer. The arrangements, known as deferred resolution agreements, will leave the defendants with a clean criminal record if they stay out of trouble for a period of time and complete a modest amount of community service, according to defense attorneys and court records. Yes, that means people who are actively participating in riots that result in severe property damage are charged with federal felony crimes. This is not some person standing off on the side, right? These are people participating and charged with federal crimes, federal felony level crimes, are getting community service and then a period of probation, somewhere between 1 and 5 years probably. And if they don't further violate the law in that probation period, the felony washes away and they don't have any criminal record. This is a great deal as a defense attorney. It's always great to get that for your client, where you can get them out of jail and go ahead and get a nice probation period, especially if you're confident that your client can avoid committing any other illegal acts, and then they can just have their criminal record washed away. It's a sweetheart deal that's few and far between, but not when you're an Antifa rioter. DOJ's apparent unwillingness to punish these individuals who allegedly committed crimes during the spring and summer 2020 protests stands in stark contrast to the harsher treatment of the individuals charged in connection with January 6th breach of the U.S. Capitol building. To date, DOJ has charged 510 individuals stemming from the Capitol breach. DOJ maintains and updates a webpage that lists the defendants charged with crimes committed at the Capitol. This database includes information such as the defendant's name, charges, case number, case documents, location of arrest, case status, and informs reader when the entry was last updated. No such database exists for alleged perpetrators of crimes associated with the spring and summer 2020 protests. It is unclear whether any defendants charged with crimes in connection with the Capitol breach have received deferred resolution agreements. To my knowledge, no, there have not been any. But this is right there. That's the issue. That disparity between an entire year of holding major cities hostage to violence, to threats of violence, to annexations, to preventing people from going to work, all the way to burglarizing and terrorizing people on the street. All of that has no concerted effort at all. But the January 6th breach of the U.S. Capitol, has an entire website with every single person specifically called out and named, whether they're guilty or not. Right now, remember, they all have a presumption of innocence, but their names and faces are out. They are published by the government. They stand publicly accused. Try and even find a news story about an Antifa person or a BLM person being held in any sort of state from the Department of Justice. First of all, they'll be hard to find. Second of all, if you do find them, you'll likely find the news that they got a very, very nice deal, like the two young lawyers who decided to Molotov cocktail a police squad car up in New York, who ended up getting very favorable deals for committing arson to a state vehicle and potentially putting police officers' lives in danger. Did you hear about that story? Did you even hear about the story? And if you did you hear about what happened to them? Are their names plastered up on a federal website? Nah. How about a state website? No, we don't want to do that. We don't want to call that out. And that is what these congressmen are doing here, is saying, hey, we're fine with how you're treating the Capitol people, by the way. Get to work. Make it equal on the other people who did this as well. Because right now, it's looking a little bit partisan. It's looking a little bit disparate. And it is. Make no mistake. It absolutely is. And it is by design, of course. But that's what I think. Why don't you guys tell me what you think down in the comment section? Can't wait to hear from you. Guys, until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.